This is Subject to Approval, where we dive into the chaos, challenges and curveballs of today's business and agency world. No jargon, no waffle, just fast, fearless conversations about what's breaking and what's working in your business today.
All right, Steve.
Hello.
The topic I'd like to talk about now is growth. Like, the whole industry is under a huge amount of pressure. Obviously, every agency leader I talk to, my focus is growth and getting to our numbers for whether it's Q2 or end of financial year. I'm talking to agency leaders about missing their EBITDA figures, about organic growth, their new business targets. It's relentless, right? It feels new, but we know it's not. And yesterday we did that incredible workshop with an agency.
Yeah, lovely people.
Beautiful people, face to face. And the whole topic was focusing on growth and a change in behaviors required in order to have a change in output.
Yeah.
What do you want to talk about with regard to this topic?
Well, let's be fair to the people involved. Let's give credit where credit's due. Yeah, things have got harder. There's pressure, there's more touch points, there's juniorization, there's issues around value add, there's optimizing margins. All those things are true, but all those things have always been true.
True.
And the halcyon days were always a couple of years before you joined the industry. Everything was great just before you got here. And I think that is true to an extent. Things have always been tough. There's always been pressure on growth. There's always been pressure on sales. But I think the fundamental difference, that one of the key challenges here, it was a job in itself.
Yeah, the new business team.
The new business team did new business. The new business head did new business. Now, whether you called that engagement or value add or sales, whatever you called that, there was a dedicated set of people that worked on that. It was their KPI, it was their target, it was their focus. And everybody else in the organization was able to say, that's not my job. That's nothing to do with me. I'll just do what comes in, and I'll do a great job of what I'm asked to do. Now, there are still those people who are dedicated on growth, although increasingly not necessarily as a whole separate team. And this embedding of the responsibilities and the targets and the KPIs and starting to see soft and hard growth targets built into the KPIs of people who traditionally didn't have it. Creative heads, strategy leads, client service teams are suddenly seeing KPIs around growth appearing.
Absolutely.
And the initial reaction is, whoa, that's not my job, because it never has been. And even if the acknowledgement of, that is my job, it's, but how the heck do I do it? And we've talked about this before, about this idea of people magically upskilling without any training or development in place for them to make that leap. And I think that pressure, things have always been hard, but they are getting harder. But we're also expecting people to step up into doing something which is hard and is uncomfortable and was a specialist role before.
Yeah, that they haven't done before. I remember my role in new business, because yes, I'm thinking back to a wonderful agency career. There was always awesome new business teams, and these new business teams, they would fly around to different countries and they would get in the room and they would work 48 hours non-stop, and they'd get the pitch on the road. My role was always, well, you just tell me what I need to present. I'll go in and be the jazz hands in the room. I'll get the clients to buy into working with me, but I'm not having to do the decks. I'm not having to do create the conversation in order to get into the room. That wasn't my job. And now increasingly that is everybody's job. How do you spot that opportunity in order to get in the room to have the conversation?
And people used to talk a lot about that. Are you a hunter or are you a gardener? Are you the person that goes out and brings back, the brontosaurus, or are you the person that tends the cucumbers? And I think now everyone's expected to be a hunter-gatherer. You expect to hunt and gather and grow, and we need to do all of these things. Personally, I've always loved new business, but I've got the attention span of a goldfish, and I love bringing the brontosaurus in and then going, okay, somebody else can cut this up, somebody else can cook it, somebody else can store it.
I was the gardener.
But that's a temperament thing. And I think people will gravitate into the areas that they enjoy and they know they're good at, and we're good at what we enjoy and we enjoy what we're good at. to suddenly say to people, no, growth is part of your job. New
Now go
business is
hunt.
part of your job. Go hunting. But I haven't got a bow and arrow.
Well, I think that's where the big reframe is. And I kind of love that. I remember I must have been in my 30s or late 20s when I realized, oh, I am a hunter. Even though my role is 100% a gardener. It's creating those opportunities and growing the business. And I actually love new business too. I love seeing opportunities. But I don't go out with the bow and arrow.
Yeah.
I go out with the, look at my gorgeous, vegetables. You're already buying cucumbers, but I've got capsicums over here. And like, it's that whole change from selling to solving. I feel very comfortable in the space of I can solve problems for my clients.
Yeah.
I feel very uncomfortable with going, I've got a product to sell. I need to get clients to put it in front of.
Yeah. But the terms are loaded. The minute you use the word sales, half the world goes, ooh.
Yeah, ugly. Ooh,
I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Well, what about growth? Ooh. Well, what about value adding? What about proactive solutions?
Well,
what about
even that, there's a
relationship
rejection.
building?
Yeah, there's a rejection to the proactivity, which again, we can have a whole other conversation about. But it's people like, I don't have time to be proactive.
Yeah.
That's just another thing to do. But
Well, and the other side of that is, I don't have the money to invest in training to help my team bring in more money.
oh my God, that's hilarious. It is really funny. I mean, let us share with you. We had an agency we were talking to about our growth program and teaching their client servicing teams to go from answering client briefs to actually hunting and finding opportunities, right? And this client came back to us and said, we really want to work with you. We love this program, but we need to new business before we can afford to pay for this.
Yeah.
I mean, it led to a really good conversation and we have found a solution. We're absolutely working with them. But yeah, that's chicken and egg. We need to have the egg before we can go and find a chicken. Like, what?
Well, and I think there's two elements to this. There's a huge amount in de-icking sales.
There is, for sure.
When we talked to the guys yesterday, what is a salesperson? And they talked about the overconfident,
Smarmy.
inauthentic, smarmy, slick, loud, manipulative. I'm like, okay, well, let's just not use that word.
Can I say I found that really surprising? Because the team we were talking to are from a media agency. They have media salespeople coming into the office every day, people they adore.
Yeah.
And they still had this impression of sales is ick, right?
That's really interesting because obviously and we talked about this, that how do you sell without selling? How do you have conversations and relationships? How do you engage without selling so that when the person does want something or does need help or does want a conversation, you're the person they call? And it's not by selling to them every time. So those people aren't coming in the door, opening up a briefcase and going, gather up, come and see what I've got for you today.
That's right. And it was interesting, the language they then used about the salespeople they do appreciate. It was like, they make my life easier.
Yeah.
They come up with solutions that I wouldn't have thought of. It's a collaborative process.
Yes.
All of that was like, that doesn't feel like sales anymore.
Yeah.
That feels like the kind of person I want to be.
Yes.
And it made it much easier.
Yeah. And again, I think to go back to a theme that I think comes up a lot in our conversations is, these aren't magic skill sets. These aren't things that people are going to naturally, they're not going to naturally make that leap over that hurdle from sales to partner, from sales to value add,
Or
from
the other
sales
way.
to trusted. They're not going to conceptually make that leap without having themselves taken through that journey. And similarly, the skill sets, that we said earlier, having somewhere to record and track and a deck doesn't open up those opportunities to use it.
Yeah, to have the conversations. That's right. Let's. So if we all recognize that growth is an absolute imperative, it is now everybody's job to find opportunities and convert them. It is now critical that you train your staff and help them know how they can get on that train to find opportunities and grow. What are I've got some thoughts on this, so I might be leading this question, but what are the ways in which leaders can approach this in a really positive way and a more negative? I've literally seen this play out. So.
Yeah, historically, I come from an era when the carrot and the stick, I never saw much carrot. It was the targets were you hit that or there's somebody waiting to come in. There's somebody that will take your role if you don't hit this target. Third prize, you're fired. But I'm not sure the stick ever worked. And it certainly doesn't work now. I don't think the do
Why
it
not?
or else. I think people just value their happiness and their life and not feeling like they're being inauthentic or a bad person.
Is
And
this a
to become-
generational thing? They need to
I think
enjoy
that-
their days?
I don't think it's a generational thing as much as is a shift of mindset. I think we came out of COVID with a much greater appreciation of our own lives and our own value. So I think it's easy for one generation to go, oh, with these young people, it's all about that. Well, no, it should have always been. I think we always should have had a lot of these values. So I think if you don't hit these sales targets, we'll find somebody else isn't the huge threat that it once was. And
That's true.
for all industries, this one in particular, that relied on the stick, to no longer be able to have that, what do you do instead? And it can't just be about throwing cash at people. It can't just be about, if it was once, if you don't hit this number, you're fired. It becomes, if you hit this number, here's your big bonus. That doesn't really motivate people either.
Teeny tiny bonuses.
Yeah,
now.
but that doesn't really motivate
No,
either,
it
even
does
if they were
not.
bigger, because that becomes the norm pretty quick, and not getting it becomes a slap in the face. How do you make people feel that what they're doing in terms of growth makes them an important part of the agency, gives them agency in inverted commas in the agency environment, and creates their role and helps their growth and gives them a sense of reward for what they're achieving, not just as a number.
Totally. So let me just dwell in this like how to get it wrong space before we go into the how to get it right. So let's sit in this discomfort for a minute. It's so easy to get it wrong. So setting targets for your people and telling them meet them or else. Setting targets for your people and saying if you don't hit them, you don't get a bonus. These are not the motivating ways to do it.
Or setting targets for your people, and when they don't hit them, nothing happens.
Yeah,
Because
indeed.
then those
indeed.
that did go the extra mile and hit them feel, well, what the hell was
Zero
all that
consequence,
for? Why
yeah.
did I bother doing that?
Yeah, I witness this, right? I do witness leaders in this energy of chase, and it's almost like I have a phrase for it, but in order to use this phrase, which is critical parent, it might take us down a whole route
Right.
of understanding psychology. But you can imagine, right, a parent who's saying, you're not doing well enough, you could do better. And the child just thinking, I want this to stop.
Yeah.
And they'll kind of use any behavior to make that critical parent be less critical and not necessarily the behavior that the parent wants to see changed.
Yeah.
It's like, just stop yelling at me. I'm going to go and,
Yeah.
And I see leaders behaving this way. Do this better. You're not doing good enough. I expect more from you. I don't think they're bad people. I
Yeah.
just think they're in a place of fear themselves, and concern and worry.
Yeah.
It is not getting the best from their people.
Well, and also just
What is going on with you? You've got to smile at this.
Just do it better isn't an answer. We said that the other day. Hustle more is not a sustainable business strategy. Saying to the losing cycling team, have you tried pedaling harder?
Yeah.
Or even in a world that I've kind of touched on in recovery, is to say to somebody who has a drinking problem, well, you should just stop.
Don't drink
I
anymore.
know that. You should hit these revenue targets. Well, I understand that.
Yes.
But I'm not understanding how.
Yes.
I'm not understanding what my role is in. I'm not understanding how to do it. Just reiterating, shouting the target at me louder does not enable me to achieve it.
Or even telling me to pick up the phone more often and have the conversation is not necessarily the answer.
Well, those are the metrics that aren't necessarily useful. They're supposed to be useful. Here's your revenue target. And how do you get there? Well, you need to have 100 emails to get 50 phone calls, to get 10 conversations, to land 5 projects. Okay, I get that. But breaking it into smaller chunks, what do I say in those conversations?
That's right. Yeah.
Who do I have the conversation with? How do I broker that conversation?
How do I motivate myself to want to have the conversation?
How do I get the going in the first place? So breaking it into smaller chunks.
Also not the answer.
Yeah, it presumes that you understand how to do it in the first place, or you're motivated to do it in the first place, or the consequences of not doing it are worse than doing it.
All right. So we've sat in the ugliness of how to not get your people to grow or be motivated and want to grow. Let's explore the how to get your people motivated to grow.
Well, I'll ask you a question, because
Please.
you're much better at some of these things than me. Are there people that just aren't going to do it?
Let me have a think about this. I don't believe people in our industry will not sell. I think we are in this industry because like we believe in advertising and marketing. We are in the industry of sales anyway. And most of the people who are in account management, which is where I've come from, actually see themselves as really good people helping their clients. I see growth and sales as really good people helping their clients.
Is there something within that self-identification we've talked about? There's some people who say, "Oh, I'm late all the time. It's just what I do.
It's who I am.
I'm no good with money. It's just who I am." So, "Oh no, I can't pick up the phone to people. It's just I can't do it.
I'm not in sales.
I can't do that. It's not me."
I do think there's something in that. And the beautiful thing about it is it's so easy to reframe.
Right.
It's so easy to reframe. We're just talking about the ick of salespeople,
Yeah.
and then we talk about the good salespeople and their solution providers and their collaborative. That's a reframe of the
framing.
same thing.
Yeah.
So instead of telling people, I want you to go out and make the phone calls, why don't we tell them, we just want you to go out and connect with people you like working with.
But
Just connect with them, have a conversation.
But there's also an element of if you take away the bit that feels like work, it's not work. When we had people say, "Oh, I feel guilty spending time talking to the client. I should be working on my spreadsheets." No, talking to the client is your job. I feel guilty
So
if I don't try and sell them something at the end of it, if I had an hour with them. It's like, no, that time isn't wasted time. That is a fundamental thing you need to be doing.
Yeah, for the audience, this is a very, very real conversation we were having yesterday. There was an account leader, and she felt guilty carving time out of her day to get away from her desk and go into spending it with clients.
Yeah.
Because she felt if she's not at her desk, she's not getting her job done.
Yeah, there's more important things I should be doing than talking to the client.
There is no single more important thing to do. Yeah.
There's literally guilt about doing the most important thing you should be doing, because the lack of a tangibility in the time that she spent talking to the client, she could have ticked 10 things off her to-do list.
Which makes your brain feel good.
Rather than the big one of, I talked to the client, that's one tick. Okay, I've done 10 ticks. But I think you're right, it's reframing. But okay, how do we get that reframing to happen? Does it organically happen? Are people going to stumble on this themselves, or does it need to be structured and formalized? Or
Obviously, we have a program to help do that and to teach people both the skills and the reframing to want to implement those skills. But even before bringing us into the room, to me, it's about culture and leadership. If your leadership is, leading from a place of fear and stick, you're not going to have the kind of culture that shifts and reframes. So, I see these fantastic leaders. I recently presented to a leadership conference in Bali, and the whole intention was we need high-performing people in order to grow. We want to grow. And I loved that there was so much conversation around how do we empower our people? How do we make them feel good about what they're doing? Because people who love what they're doing go and do more of it, and the agency grows. On the flip side, I've been having conversations with another network, which is very transactional. They're very much talking about we need to meet these figures, therefore we need to have these people having these meetings in these ways. I'm like, ooh. I have this beautiful detachment from it, which is I get to observe and I get to be very, very interested and care, but I'm not responsible for what happens here. Yeah. So I'm observing and I'm guiding and I'm watching, and I see this one network talking about creating this culture of support and connectedness and
empowerment
and collaborative solution. And I see this other network talking about like the numbers and getting the meetings in the diary, and it's very much transactional. I'm
going to ask you, which one's growing?
Well, ask me in 6 months' time.
Okay.
Right, because the cultural change is it needs time to have its impact.
If I had to put money on one, I know which one I'd put the money on.
Yeah, there's interesting things at play here. So let's see where they're at.
Well, I think we've talked a lot about the changing face, the changing nature, or the not changing nature, why people have this reticence, why there's the need, how to move people from how they feel about the ick to the, actually, no, I really like that person when they come in the room, and be that, and how to move people through those framing from one to the other, and the potential use of, as you say, all the tools and the coaching and the training and the mindset work that gets a team from one place to another. I think that's probably a really good place.
I'm wondering if we've missed anything. Like, is there a sound bite that you would give somebody? How can I shift my team from just doing what they're told to proactively looking for opportunity?
That's a great question.
I'm good at what I do.
It's
I'm joking.
it's not somebody else's job.
Yeah.
It's not somebody else's job. And it's not icky.
Yeah. There's internal and external piece there, right? The internal
Yes.
piece, which is how do we reframe? How do we help your teams reframe? How do you, as a leader of an agency, demonstrate that this reframe, that your people should want to be doing this, right? How do you lead that?
It's necessary, and if we do it right, it's fun.
Yeah, indeed. Fab, Steve. Thank you. If anyone has any questions on this topic and how, what advice would we give in order for you to move your teams into much more of a growth-oriented machine, please reach out, because we love what we do and we love supporting agency leaders to love what they do.
Great stuff. Thank you.
Work can be tough, but you don't have to figure it out alone. We're here to help for coaching, workshops, or just a smart second opinion. Let's talk. Contact hello@artemisapac.com. We're Artemis, and we get it.